Do you like difficult games? That isn't meant to be a rhetorical question, it's an honest one. The hardest games I've played can be pretty frustrating to deal with, to put it lightly. You boot up a game like Fear and Hunger and learn very quickly whether or not it's going to be something you vibe with, or something that'll scar you so deeply that you'll start to see random sticks as the sole line of defense between you and insanity. For some, it might be both. My point is, difficulty is a volatile element that can define your game's entire identity, for better or worse. How can you make something like that enjoyable for a player? To go a step further, what does it really mean for a game to be difficult? How can you define it? While it certainly isn't a new topic of discussion, video game difficulty is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. It's a favorite talking point on social media. There are a bunch of other YouTube video essays that do their own deep dives on the subject, and even some legitimate academic research analyzing the different effects of difficulty on the player. In pretty much all of these, there's a focus on the implementation of multiple difficulty settings. It's safe to say that it's a thoroughly dissected element. I don't think that should be the only part of the conversation when it comes to difficulty, though. I also want to talk about the games that have one defined level of challenge, like a mountain trail with a single path to the top. I believe both of these approaches to difficulty have merit and can shape the experience of playing the game into something truly memorable. By breaking them down and looking at them with a more critical eye, I'm hoping we can get a better understanding on why difficulty is designed the way that it is. Who knows, maybe we'll find something beyond just these two ideas. Let's get into it. The first word that probably crosses your mind after hearing the word difficulty is settings, if you have perpetual gamer brain. Don't worry, I have perpetual gamer brain. For almost as long as we've had video games, we've had hard modes and easy modes. I never really stopped to think about what made those modes harder or easier growing up. I just knew that I liked winning a lot more than I liked losing, so I never really ventured beyond whatever the standard difficulty was as a kid. Now that I'm older and slightly more patient, I've dipped my toes into harder modes if the challenge is interesting enough. What makes it interesting? Why, what a fantastic segue question, SMT Nocturne featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series. In my experience, there are 3 categories that difficulty options affect. I'm going to go over them in order from the one that I like the least to the one I like most. The first category is stat numbers. This is probably the simplest way to add flexibility to a game's difficulty. Make enemies have lower stats or higher stats, have the player deal more or less damage, earn more or less resources. These immediately change the overall experience by just manipulating a couple values or multipliers. But that's also all that's really been done. Nothing new has been introduced for the player to engage with. Everything that you can do and the game can do is the same. If you've ever heard the term artificial difficulty, this is the most prominent example I can think of. The main result of using this type of flexibility is making the player's margin of error more forgiving on easier settings and less forgiving on harder ones. This works best in something like an RPG, where the mechanics will often allow the player to overcome the challenges faced with a deeper understanding of all the systems at work. The second category is smarter enemies. This is where I think things start to get pretty cool. Let's have a quick heart-to-heart and level with each other here a bit, viewer. If the games we play really wanted to, they could find a way to beat us no matter what we do. They know everything we're capable of, know what we're going to do the moment we do it, and can respond to anything we do in an instant. If they did that all the time, though, we'd just constantly lose without any chance of winning. I don't think that'd be any fun. That's why enemy AI is intentionally designed imperfectly. It's made with flaws and holes that the player can take advantage of, which is where this type of difficulty can come into play. On higher difficulties, the windows of opportunity that the enemies give the player will become slimmer and harder to navigate. a lot of times they'll be more aggressive and force you to make even more split-second decisions. Is this ultimately just a different way to explain the same margin of error concept we talked about for the last category? Kind of, but I think there is a key difference to the two. To overcome difficulties that make use of stat numbers, it comes down to the player's ability to take advantage of the game's mechanics. With difficulties using smarter enemies, not only will the player need to know how to use the game's mechanics, they'll also need to understand how the mechanics can be used against them. The enemies will pull out new tricks that they wouldn't on an easier mode. Put simply, the game and the player engage with one another on a deeper level as the difficulty increases. There's more back and forth in the interactions between them, and these interactions constantly present the player with problems they need to find solutions for on the fly. CPUs in fighting games are probably the best example of this. Fighting game characters will pretty much always have the same stats and the same abilities to use in every match. But just take a look at the difference between this round of me fighting the CPU on the lowest difficulty and now compare it to the round against the same character on the highest difficulty. In nearly every way, nothing has changed between these two examples. The game is just playing better against me now. The last category is easily the most interesting to me. Mechanical changes. Like the name suggests, these are difficulty options that will change existing game mechanics, or sometimes, the best times, introduce totally new mechanics that alter the experience entirely. These are a bit harder to describe in one specific way or attached to a single genre, so I'll give you a few of my favorite examples of this. European Extreme Mode and Metal Gear games cause an instant game over whenever you alert an enemy, making stealth not just an option, but a necessity. The hard mode for Wario Land 4 turns every level into a sprint, by immediately activating the game's exit timer mechanic. The original Silent Hill games have a puzzle difficulty modifier that'll rework the clues and solutions to each puzzle. The highlight that comes to mind for me, though, is how it's used in the Devil May Cry games. I think it's safe to say that even on normal mode, these games can be pretty challenging for the average player. Enemies will overwhelm you with all sorts of different attacks, and you'll have no idea how to deal with any of their BS at first. Your options starting out are also pretty limited, as you unlock more weapons and moves while you progress. With enough time and effort, you can improve and get to the point where, you can at least beat the game. When you do that, you'll unlock a new, harder difficulty setting starting from the very beginning. You might jump right into it, thinking you know exactly what to expect. The enemies might be a bit harder, they might be a bit smarter now, but it's nothing you can't handle. Wait, why are you here? The enemy formations for every encounter have been remixed, meaning that more powerful late-game enemies will now show up from the very beginning. Not only that, but on the hardest difficulties, they'll also gain the ability to pull their devil trigger, just like you. This dramatically boosts their attack and defense values to the point where it's almost necessary for you to also be in Devil Trigger to do anything meaningful against them. This mechanic is at its most insane in DMC3, where an enemy in Devil Trigger will gain a unique immunity to knockback and launching properties on your moves until a special stagger value is filled. It becomes nearly impossible to pull off the combos you were able to before on easier difficulties until you thoroughly understand how to work around this new resistance. What makes this even crazier is that this can actually help extend your combos well beyond what's normally possible if you can properly route your attacks to stun and launch the enemy at the right time. I can't do this, and the only reason I know as much as I do is because of this video by BG, so if you want to learn more, check it out. The previous things we talked about are still here. The enemies are still stronger and smarter. But now, there are also changes to the foundation of the game itself that make it harder. This is just one example, and not even the best one. Hades is a pretty awesome game, for a bunch of different reasons. It's got amazing characters, beautiful art direction, and the gameplay has both pick-up and play levels of intuitiveness to its controls and a deep complexity to all of its mechanics that make it fun to play from your first run to your 1000th run. You can pull off some crazy stuff with the right build and execution, and in most cases, you'll be able to steamroll through just about everything once you've got it figured out. That is, until the Pact of Punishment comes into play. The Pact of Punishment allows you to modify tons of things about your run to make it even more challenging. Take more damage from enemies and hazards, make enemies faster, tougher, and stronger, add more enemies to encounters, enforce a rolling time limit that only refreshes when you finish a stage, make items cost more than usual, limit what boons you can choose from, force yourself to sacrifice a boon every time you clear an area, give every boss new moves to deal with. There are so many options you're given to totally customize the type of challenge you face. Where this gets even cooler are the infernal gates that can show up, which require you to be at a certain level of heat to enter. These rooms can be a struggle to clear, but they will also contain some of the best loot. The game actively rewards you for choosing a harder path. This is one of my favorite ways to motivate people to try out harder difficulties, through incentivizing them with a reward. Smart people call this extrinsic motivation. Maybe it's a costume, or an overpowered weapon, or a concept art gallery. And sometimes the reward for clearing a hard difficulty is an even harder one, like in DMC's case. It's like the game saying, "Oh, you think you're good? Let's see about that." Giving the player an incentive for choosing a higher difficulty is great. It makes you feel like you're working towards something tangible. One of the most popular talking points of difficulty is balance. More specifically, the definition of what exactly makes a game's difficulty balanced. Overcoming a challenge can feel great, but if the core gameplay design doesn't respect the player enough, that feeling of joy can change to one of anxious relief. The games that need to be aware of this the most are those that use a fixed difficulty. When I think of games that use fixed difficulty, the first ones that come to mind are older games. Whether it's arcade games, platformers, or RPGs, there's pretty much always just the default difficulty with nothing for the player to adjust. This was generally done to get the most amount of playtime out of the game, through having the player repeat the same challenges over and over. Technology still had very clear limits, and we were also kind of still reinventing the concept of what a video game is all the time. But it's thanks to these circumstances that they ended up creating a cycle of making the player grow better at the game, little by little as they faced bigger obstacles. This cycle is the key element to what makes fixed difficulty just as useful as flexible difficulty, in my opinion. It keeps you coming back for that sweet, sweet catharsis. Smart people call this intrinsic motivation. If you want to see this at work, there's one example I think everyone can predict. I mean, it's only one of the most popular games known explicitly for its brutal challenge, after all. That's right. We're going to talk about Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. Getting Over It is a sort of puzzle platformer, I guess. The puzzle isn't some sort of logic problem that you solve with gameplay. The puzzle is the gameplay itself. This is the same person who made QWOP, just to give you an idea of what I mean by that statement. Your goal is simple. Make it to the top of a mountain. The only thing you have direct control of is the movement of your character's arms carrying a sledgehammer, which you use to propel yourself around the different obstacles you come across on your climb. There aren't any real checkpoints, and mistakes can cost you a bunch of progress if you're not careful. The game makes a strict demand of the player. Learn the mechanics and dedicate yourself to understanding them, or be doomed to fail. It doesn't hold your hand either. Any setback faced is a direct result of a mistake you made. Mistakes are more than just inconveniences. They're the humbling force that constantly remind the player what they need to overcome to be successful. It makes reaching that success all the more satisfying. I think this is balanced difficulty. Though they use different approaches, this feeling of accomplishment is similar to the one you get from clearing a challenge in a game on a harder mode. There are more ways to make a game with fixed difficulty harder beyond just using unintuitive controls. You can still make mistakes punishing, and gameplay challenges that demand the player's focus while also allowing the controls to feel smooth and responsive. The example I want to talk about here is honestly the game that I wanted to talk about the most going into this project. So, in what can only be described as a real video essayist move, I built an entire video around that single hyperfixation. ZeroRanger is a shmup made by the developer duo of System Erasure. Shmups are a genre that find their roots in arcade games like Gradius and R-Type. On the surface, they're simple games. Go through a few stages that each take 5 to 10 minutes apiece, and try to take out as many enemies as you can before you reach the boss encounters. Sometimes there's a unique mechanic that spices things up, whether it's Ikaruga's polarity system or Blue Revolver's secondary weapons. Things are rarely ever easy for the player though. Wave after wave is sent after you, with no room to breathe and no time to break down each situation. It's you and your reflexes trying to make split-second decision after split-second decision, just in hopes of making it to the end, let alone getting a high score. It's a genre that can be pretty daunting to first get into, especially if you pick one that isn't friendly to newcomers. Thankfully, I would say that ZeroRanger is one of the most newcomer-friendly shmups you can play. That's not to say that it's easy, hell no. It's still got plenty of that classic arcade tomfoolery thrown at you, and there's no easy mode or assist mode to help you out either. There's only one level of difficulty for everything, and it's built to push you and force you to improve every step of the way. The introduction to the game's story makes it very clear just what you're getting yourself into. This is a world that's being invaded by alien tyrants, and the invaders are just about to claim victory. A single pilot is the Earth's only hope from destruction, the planet's ace in the hole. This pilot is not who we play as, though. You play as one of the only 2 backup pilots that aren't nearly as experienced as the aforementioned ace, because the ace lost and was captured by the invaders. There's pretty much no chance of winning now. We're the only ones left that can fight back. Well, alright then. In spite of how dire the plot setup is, the game itself feels really good to play. Your ship controls with silky smooth precision. Each weapon type has its own niche that allows you to customize your playstyle to your liking. And most importantly, you can freely transform into a mech. It's insanely difficult, but it's never unfun. Every action you take has weight to it, and every small decision you make feels like it matters. The mechanics are satisfying to engage with, whether you're winning or losing. There's one thing that ZeroRanger does that takes this feeling and runs with it. The first time you play the game, if you're like me, you'll probably be robbed of all your lives and humbled pretty quickly. A voice explains that we've involved ourselves in a vicious cycle of failure and death. It hammers in the weight of what we're trying to accomplish before ending with the coolest game over message I've ever seen. May you attain enlightenment. After you input your high score, you're greeted with this samsara with 8 empty slots in it. Then the points you just earned begin to fill up one of those slots, forming a black crystal inside. The game doesn't tell you this directly, but these crystals represent your continues. Each time a run ends, your high score gets added to a running total that fills up with more and more of these crystals, which means that you gradually gain the ability to use more continues on each of your runs. This adds a bit of a safety cushion for you to be able to keep making progress if there are problem segments and stages that eat up your lives. You can also pick which stage you want to start a run from and start with all of your continues. This is actually pretty generous to the player, since most other shmups will always start you from stage 1. You get the opportunity to break down the game bit by bit, piece by piece, until you're able to make it all the way to the end. As for what lies at the end of the game, well, it's been a long, grueling road. After being sent back in time to an alternate stage 1 upon beating stage 4, you finally made it back to stage 4 again. Here, we face the toughest boss in the game by far, known as Despair. The first phase sucks, where a wizard gradually ponders upon more and more orbs that you need to destroy all at once as quickly as you can, otherwise the orbs respawn. The second phase is awesome. It's lightning fast, making you dodge and weave between bullets, swords, drills, and samsara laser traps. By this point, you're familiar enough with the game that you should be able to infer how it wants you to respond to make it past everything Despair throws at you. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to actually do what it wants right away. The first time I got here, this fight alone took up all my continues. Maybe more than just the first time I got here. I did manage to beat her eventually though. It feels amazing, but you're not given any time to breathe. You're immediately thrown into a Star Fox-esque escape sequence where all of your upgrades are slowly stripped away, your ship falling apart as you struggle towards the end. Finally, with only your basic shot left, you manage to break free. We might not be able to make it back home now, but at least the day is saved. Right? Our computer tells us that the enemy forces have successfully wiped out all of humanity. This lone pilot is the only survivor. Our ship is useless. The mission is a failure. All seems lost. We're then given a choice. There's one chance of beating the invaders, and to even take that chance will require putting everything on the line. Not letting the warning spook us, we have to take that chance. We're then fused with the jewel powering our ship and sent even further back in time to the first appearance of the invaders. The goal is simple: defeat the enemy here and now before they ever have a chance of becoming a problem, to change history and save humanity. As we're being sent back, the samsara that we've been filling up throughout the entire playthrough appears again, and any remaining continues we have merge with us as well. After arriving in the true final stage, it becomes clear what those continues are being used for now. They're the lives we have to make it through this last challenge. There's no way to shoot anything out of the way anymore. If we want to deal damage, we have to get close enough to almost touch our target. You have to figure all of this out for yourself in the moment. No time freezing tutorials or convenient tooltips for you. Getting to this point was probably the most panicked and confused I got while playing the game. And because of that, I got bopped pretty quickly. And that's fine though. I can just start back up from the last stage, clean up my despair fight so I have some more continues left afterwards, and then I'll get my run back. Wait, what is this? Why can I only choose the first stage? Where did all of my continues go? No, don't tell me. This is what it meant by everything? This is the game's greatest trick, and it saves it for the end. It's the most definitive example of the cycle of death and rebirth it told us about. To truly beat the game, we have to risk all of our progress in exchange for one chance to succeed. And in my case, I had to take that risk multiple times. There's no way to get around it. There's no secret power-up you can find to make it easier. You just have to get good enough to win. It tells you to sit down, shut up, and lock in. You will get good, and the game will make sure of it. Not through pampering you or catering to whatever frustration you might feel from failing, but by making you as a player stronger. Every time you get sent back to stage 1, you'll be better at the game than the last time you were there. The enemies become predictable. The boss's bullet patterns become easier to navigate, and you're able to last longer without needing to continue. You'll keep improving more and more, and while it might start from a place of necessity, eventually you'll find yourself wanting to improve. For me, I think this is the essence of what balanced difficulty is. If this were any other type of game pulling this move, it would be incredibly annoying, to put it nicely. But in this case, this specific case, I think that this form of growth through repetition is the entire point of the game. This cycle of death and rebirth only has one path out, and it's the path that leads you to enlightenment. When I first started making the video, I was thinking that this would be a good stopping point. I felt that I had adequately answered the questions that led to its creation. However, the more I started to dive into the concept of difficulty, the more I realized that there was a sort of shared ground between fixed and flexible difficulty that was worth exploring. Player-made difficulty is really, really interesting. It's a form of difficulty that isn't enforced by the game, but by the player. To use a simpler term, it's a challenge run. By introducing a few restrictions or handicaps to a game, it can completely transform the experience into something different. 3 heart runs in Zelda, no sphere grid runs in Final Fantasy X, the Alexandrian amount of different speed runs. There's too many different types of challenge runs to list. Let's try this. Think of your favorite game, put its title into the YouTube search bar, and put "can you beat" before it or "but" after it, and you'll probably find at least one type of challenge run. I think there's one type of challenge that's more popular than any other, though. Pokemon games, at their core, are pretty easy. I mean, they kind of have to be, they're games marketed for kids. The type advantage mechanics are relatively simple. The pool of different Pokemon and helpful items you have at any given time is quite generous, and the worst thing that happens from losing a battle is that you lose a bit of money and then you have to start the fight over. You're able to fully heal your team for free at a Pokemon Center that you can find in every town or city, too. These are supposed to be fun, cozy adventures that you can let yourself relax with while you take your time soaking in the experience. Nuzlocke runs are the complete antithesis to that.
This time, Luigi 2 wasn't going down alone.
There are 3 rules that are central to every one of the many, many variations of Nuzlocks. To start, You are only allowed to capture the first Pokemon you encounter in every area. If you don't catch it, you're out of luck until the next one. The second rule is the pivotal one that defines the Nuzlocke. If a Pokemon faints, you have to release it. Or, you can just make a separate box for the fainted Pokemon. That's what I did. This single change completely alters how you approach the game. It makes every decision in battle matter, and it makes the tension that comes from the RNG involved with damage calculations, attack accuracy, and status ailments exponentially more powerful. One wrong move, one bad roll of the dice, and a run can just end if you're not careful. Trainer encounters aren't just roadblocks in your way from getting to the next objective anymore. They're life or death battles where your next choice could cost you hours of progress. It's this constant threat of danger and unavoidable risks that make every little victory feel like a monumental achievement. The final rule doesn't affect the gameplay, but it will affect the player's heart. Every Pokemon you catch has to be given a nickname. This builds an immediate connection between you and your team that'll most likely end in some sort of horrible tragedy. And this is just the most basic form of Nuzlocke. More difficult versions of the run limit your ability to use the Pokemon Center, prohibit you from using items in battle, and make it so you can't level up your Pokemon past a certain point. There are even pseudo-cooperative runs like a Soul Link, where you and a friend play a game concurrently, and the Pokemon you both catch in the same area become linked. If one person uses a Pokemon in their team, the other person has to use that linked partner in theirs. If a Pokemon dies, so does their partner. These are all creative ways to introduce difficulty through adding a few simple, self-imposed rules. So before making this video, I've never actually tried to do a Nuzlocke run of my own before. I wanted to make sure that I actually had experience with what I was talking about, so I decided to try one for my favorite game in the series, Pokemon Black. Now, I know that making a dramatic retelling of this playthrough in the form of an animation would be great for views. But sadly, I'm not an animator. But I am a video editor. I pick Snivy for my starter, hoping to make use of its typing and decent offensive stats as a mainstay on my team throughout the game. Almost immediately, I'm made aware of just how important healing items will be during the run. Slowly and carefully, I make my way through the first couple of routes, catching a couple of new Pokemon as I do. Then I arrive to the first major obstacle, the Striaton City Gym. The unique thing about this gym compared to all the others in the game is that its leader's main type is always the opposite of your starters. It strong-arms the player into building a well-balanced team and to not just rely on the first Pokemon they get. To help out, you can obtain a Pokemon that's advantageous to the leader's typing in a small side area just next to the city. I do this, train it up a bit, and stock up on some healing items before challenging the gym. And this is where everything falls apart. One of the trainers you can battle here uses a Patrat that can use the move Bide. The smart thing to do here would be to just not attack and use moves that can buff or debuff, to use an item, or just burn a turn by switching to another Pokemon. I did not do this. I got greedy and tried to finish off the Patrat before it had the chance to complete its attack. This did not work, and I suffered my first Nuzlocke casualty. Not only that, this was the member of my team that was meant to be the star player for the battle against the leader. When I do challenge them, it's pretty much just my starter that has any chance. But things go from bad to worse, and it falls to the leader's first Pokemon. At this point, it's over. One by one, my Pokemon are defeated. With my team wiped out, the run comes to an end. I have failed. Okay, but then I started another run. I won't take any risks this time. I'll play it totally safe. Why I didn't even get to nickname it. Okay, third time's the charm. The most important lesson I learned from my failed run was simple. You can never be too careful. The battle system of Pokemon gives RNG a monumental impact. Things like crits and damage rolls can mean the difference between you just scraping by without any losses or being totally wiped out. It's stressful, but it's also where a lot of the fun in a Nuzlocke comes from. Every decision is given a tremendous weight. Building a team was also way more interesting with such a limited pool of options. Pokemon who I would never use, like Pansear, became valuable members of my team, and favorites like Sock that I was lucky enough to find were staples that I fought tooth and nail to protect. It was stressful and rewarding. Victories were hard won, and the sacrifices made left me in despair. But with every sacrifice made, there was a lesson in patience and decision making to be learned. I took those lessons with me all the way through each of the 8 gyms, into the Pokemon League against the Elite Four, and to the very top of Team Plasma's castle, where I would overcome the final bosses, N and Ghetsis, and ascend to heights I never imagined. As a Nuzlocke victor. In all seriousness though, this run had me locked in and more invested with every aspect of the gameplay than I ever have been. The game that I played in 2011 and the one I played here are effectively 2 totally different experiences that use the same mechanics as a base. And like I mentioned, there are so many more ways that I could have changed up the rules to customize the experience even further. This applies to any game you could think of. With enough imagination, you can create a near infinite number of ways to play your favorite game. You're able to set goals for yourself, where the only reward is the sense of self-satisfaction from accomplishing them. The game won't acknowledge you for going out of the way to make it harder on yourself. At least, that's the case most of the time. There's one last game, one last challenge I want to take on before I'll be satisfied enough to call this video finished. ZeroRanger, and yes, we're talking about it again, I told you why I made this video already, is a shmup game, as we've established. Since their conception in the arcade, every shmup has had one specific type of challenge run that anyone looking to call themselves a master of their game wants to complete. The one credit clear. The name for the run comes from the genre's arcade roots, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You have to clear the entire game from beginning to end without using a single continue. This is an incredible feat, one that demands near perfection from anyone pursuing it. The thing is, some shmups will actually have a unique response when a player manages to complete a 1cc. There are games that lock true endings and final bosses behind 1cc's, and those are some of the most insane things I've ever seen in a game. This got me curious about what a 1cc for ZeroRanger would result in. Would it even be anything at all? That curiosity led to a simple thought, and that simple thought would lead to an unforgettable journey. I wonder if I could do that. And so, I began practicing. I would first practice each level individually to familiarize myself with their tricks and twists. The goal would be to at least end a stage with the same amount of lives that I had at the start before starting to practice the next one. This sounded like a good strategy at first, but I quickly realized 2 flaws with the plan. First, the amount of points needed to gain an extra life would scale differently based on several factors, like your total score and current amount of lives. This meant that my idea of having a net neutral run of a level in terms of life loss would actually be inconsistent for a real run. Second, while there aren't any true difficulty settings the player has control over, there are actually multiple levels of difficulty that are so cleverly hidden, you might not even realize it. ZeroRanger uses a dynamic difficulty system, which means that the level of challenge will constantly change based on how well the player is performing. The better your run, the faster and more aggressive enemies will be. These two issues meant that the only way to truly practice this challenge would be to do so from the very beginning of the game. So that's what I did. Every day when I got home from work, I would do at least a couple of runs. I couldn't make it past stage 1-2 without continues when I started out. Both the mid-boss and boss can be extremely annoying to deal with, especially the mid-boss. Like, this guy is my least favorite enemy in the game, bar none. This guy sucks. This stage and its variation are easily the ones I have the most amount of practice time in. After a few days of practice, I was able to make it to stage 1-3. This is probably my favorite level in the game just for the pacing. It moves from set piece to set piece until hitting one of the game's hypest moments, the duel with Grapefruit. A few days later, and I broke through the barrier to stage 1-4. This is where I ran into my first major roadblock. Stage 1-4 is by far the longest in the game, which means that it also has the most opportunities to make mistakes. And oh boy, I make a lot of mistakes here. I've had so many great runs that I thought had the potential to go all the way, just die on this stage after a couple of bad segments. One of the only saving graces is that the boss rush you face at the end of the level gives you an extra life for each one you beat, if you can even manage to make it to the boss rush. No matter how hard I practiced or how closely I studied successful runs, I wasn't able to make it past 1-4. My goal of achieving a 1cc started to feel insurmountable for the first time. Give up or persevere? So I made my choice. I persevered. The next month, I had started a fresh save file to show a friend the game's story from the beginning, and I was playing around while grinding for additional continues. Because it's become a part of my routine at this point, I decided to try a 1cc run just for the sake of it. I beat 1-1 without much trouble. Then 1-2. Then 1-3. It's around this point that I realized just how much of what I'm doing feels like second nature now. Still, there was a wall in front of me. 1-4 begins, and although I still make mistakes, they're fewer and farther between than they've ever been. I beat the first boss, then the second, the third, and finally the fourth. Somehow, I've just cleared the first loop of the game without using a continue for the very first time. I didn't celebrate just yet though. I wanted to see just how far I can make it now that I got over this impenetrable barrier. So I kept playing. I just focused on what's in front of me on the screen. And when the dust settled, I made it all the way to the end of stage 2-3, the second duel with Grapefruit. Just 2 boss fights away from total victory. Now, a 1cc felt more possible than ever. The success that seemed a world away was now just around the corner. Dozens of hours of failure after failure were on the precipice of bearing their fruit. I started playing even more, with a couple of runs after work turning into as many runs as my hands can take. Every day that passed, I would tell myself that tomorrow would be the day I finally accomplish what I set out to do. Eventually, I started to be able to make it all the way to the final boss in my best runs, but would still ultimately fall short. Nerves would start to get to me and my hands would tremble, leading to some terrible last-minute chokes. These almost always would happen during the first phase with the deadly orbs of pondering. Making it this far only to lose like this was incredibly frustrating. But there was no way I was quitting now. This wizard, these orbs, this final boss, they were the last hurdle between me and my 1 credit clear. So I kept practicing and practicing and practicing. Then one day, after an especially long work shift, I tell myself that I'll do one good attempt before going to bed. I don't get off to the best start, missing some easy score chain opportunities in stage 1-1 and getting hit in areas I usually wouldn't this early in the run. Part of my mind is quick to doubt and is tempted to just start over again. But another part, one that I've been tempering this whole time, knows that it's too soon to give up. I refocus. The only thing that I need to do in this moment is play the game. Then something happens that tells me this run is different. My 1-4 is actually pretty clean. It's not perfect, but it is the best I've ever played. I end the stage with the maximum amount of lives and go into the second loop. The only thought in my mind at this point is, do not mess this up. I play as safe as I can for 2-1 and 2-2, though this honestly may have backfired at points where being more aggressive could have prevented some hits. 2-3 is my last chance to score a lot of points and get a stockpile of lives before the final boss, so I try my best to get as many as I can. Once I make it to Grapefruit, another first occurs. Near the end of the fight, Grapefruit will charge up a massive drill before diving down towards the player. They can either dodge the attack normally, or, if they make the objectively correct choice for their mech weapon, meet the attack head on with a drill of their own. This opposing clash of spirals warps the space around you. A hail of bullets surrounds you from all sides, and you have to dodge them all while still pushing back against Grapefruit. I was never able to make it past this last part of the fight without getting hit at least once. At least until this run. This was the point that I knew that if there was any time I was going to get the 1cc, it would be right here and now. There was just one last thing to do. The slow descent to the final boss has me tense, but it also gives me time to think through my strategy. I've learned that there's a way to effectively skip the last batch of orbs at the cost of 1 life by absorbing them all at once. With the amount of lives I have now, I decide that I can sacrifice one of them to guarantee passage to the second phase. The fight begins. I take out 1 orb. Then I take out 2 orbs. Next, I take out 3 orbs. Now, it's time to put the skip into practice. I get into position and mess up. I feel my wrists jerk in recoil, but it's okay, I can try again. I do so and mess up again. Panic begins to set in. This is going to be where everything ends, just like always, the doubtful side of my mind tells me. Just when I'm on the verge of shutting down, though, the other side of my mind, the one that trusts every moment I've dedicated to reaching this point, proclaims loud and clear, no, I've got this. I've never been more tuned in to ZeroRanger than I am at this moment. I take out the last wave of orbs with straightforward aggression and move on to the second phase. There's no reason for me to push any more than I have to, so I take my time whittling away at Despair's health. I'm dodging attacks that broke my brain just looking at them during my first playthrough. It's still not flawless though, and I do take a couple hits. I'm down to my last life. One more mistake and it's all the way back to the beginning for me. One more minute of concentration, and this ends here and now. I take a deep breath, clear my mind, and put every ounce of faith I can muster into myself. This is it. After despair went down, I couldn't help but pump my fist with sheer joy. Weeks of my life where all of my free time revolved around this game had finally paid off. There was still one final piece of gameplay that I needed to handle though, the escape sequence. It's here that the game rewards the few people determined enough to reach a 1-credit clear. The music that accompanies the escape sequence normally is pretty good. The track is called Crisis, and it's an appropriate title, I'd say. It's got a desperate, frantic sound to it. It's like it's telling the player, don't get comfortable yet. There's still more to be done. It sets the mood perfectly for the first-time experience getting to this point. However, if you're able to make it to the escape sequence starting from the very beginning of the game without using a continue, a different track is used. It starts out similar enough to Crisis, but after a few seconds, it evolves into something different. The core melody and structure is still the same, but the tone has shifted from desperation to resolve. This is my favorite piece of music in the game. It's like a flow state given form through sound. The game reaches out to the player and recognizes how far they've come with one last burst of encouragement. All the hours of practice, every tiny improvement made over time, each run that ended in failure, it culminates in this single sequence. The name for this track is Now or Never, Get Fired Up. And I think it is a perfect description of what reaching this point feels like. It's a rush that only comes from pushing yourself to the absolute limit over and over again until you finally break past it. So at the beginning of this video, I asked the question, what does it mean for a game to be difficult? After exploring the idea this much, I think I have my answer. Difficulty can bring so much to what a game's experience can be. It can make a game more enjoyable by encouraging the player to explore the different systems and mechanics at work. It can create entirely new ways to experience a game through taking those same systems and mechanics and morphing them into something totally different. But for me, there was one simple takeaway that was most important. The feeling from accomplishing something truly difficult is unmatched. To devote yourself 100% to reaching a goal that seems unachievable at the outset, running into setback after setback, and finally having all of that effort coalesce into a single moment of success, it's the ultimate reward. That is what truly defines difficulty, in my opinion. To make the player wholly confident in their own abilities through struggle and triumph. 2024 was the hardest year of my life, by a significant margin. I'll save you the details, but to keep it simple, shit sucked. Things went wrong in ways I never would have predicted at the start of the year. In spite of this, I feel more fulfilled than I have in a long time. I'm doing well at a job that gives me the stability I need to take my time on my own projects. The couple of videos I made pushed me out of my creative comfort zone and helped me grow as a writer, editor, capture artist, and speaker. I finally got the chance to meet some great friends that I've known for years in person for the very first time. When I look back at 2024, these fragments of joy scattered in the pile of never-ending crap are what'll be the memories that stand out to me. They'll remind me that no matter what I'm going through, no matter how hard life may get, there will always be opportunities to grow and dreams that are worth striving for. The creation of this silly video is just another one of those instances. I know I'm not the only one who's had a tough year either, so if you haven't heard it from anyone else, let me be the one to tell you, you did great. You made it to the finish line and you're right back here going strong on another lap around the sun. Maybe you've already got plans for how you're making 2025 better. If you do, that's awesome. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to make one suggestion as this video's call to action. Pick a game to play, any game, and then find a way to make it more difficult for you. Maybe it's selecting hard mode, maybe it's through doing some sort of challenge run, maybe it's Void Stranger. It should be Void Stranger. Just find a way to really push yourself through some of the games you play this year. Let yourself fail, learn, and grow over and over again. If you can do it here, you can handle whatever obstacle life has to throw at you. I believe in you.